right, students, we're going to talk about some of the challenges that were made to slavery in this section of Chapter 17. I am going to try to make this in one screencast, so I might go kind of fast on some of it. All right, in 1854, you had some challenges for political challenges. The Republican Party was born. The Democratic Party began to divide along philosophical lines. Your book calls it sectional lines because really it did divide North and South. So the Northern Democrats mostly felt like they believed, like Douglas did, that people should vote on slavery, while as the Southern Democrats didn't feel that way so much. They just felt like slavery should go everywhere. And also the Whig Party is beginning to fracture up the same way. The Northern Whigs were mostly anti-slavery and the Southern Whigs were more pro-slavery. So the country, no matter what political party you were in, was tending to fracture up according to whether you were pro-slavery or anti-slavery. And so that tended to be North and South, honestly, because that's just how it worked out geographically, but that's how it worked out. And of course, the Free Soil Party was there too. But what happened was the anti-slavery Democrats and Whigs in the North joined up with the Free Soil Party, who wasn't getting much traction, to form something new, the Republican Party. This is a map of the congressional elections in 1854, and I want you to take notice of it because you will see all of those dark pink states across the North all swung Republican, and it caused the House of Representatives to then become controlled by the brand new Republican Party. Now, this is quite a shocker. You don't have a brand new political party come on the scene and then totally take control of the House of Representatives. So you can imagine that the southern states and southern voting bloc was quite taken aback when they saw the results of this. And so they realized that even though the Republican Party is a brand new thing, it is something to be worried about as far as their stand on slavery. All right, again, the Republican Party's whole reason for being was to stop the spread of slavery, not to abolish slavery, but to stop the spread of it into the new territories. And again, because of that election, they showed that they should be taken seriously. So if you look at the last two bullet points, it says almost 75% of the Democrats who ran in the free states in the North lost in 1854. And at the same time, the reverse was true across the South. So if you were a Republican and you ran in the South, you lost. So again, it just goes to show you that the country was really dividing up along the slavery lines, pro and anti-slavery, which meant North and South. All right, so then you have the presidential election of 1856, which, please look at this. You see John C. Fremont's name is in red. His name is actually pronounced Fremont because it's of the French, but John C. Fremont's name is in red. He is the very first Republican presidential candidate, not Abraham Lincoln. Fremont is first. All right, the Whig Party didn't even offer up a candidate during this election because they were so split up over slavery, they couldn't come together enough to offer a candidate. The Republicans run Fremont, and he was famous because he had been a Western explorer. So he's a household name. That was smart on their part to offer this guy as a candidate so people knew who he was. The Democrats nominated James Buchanan, see the guy down at the bottom, and he is a Democrat, but he's from the North. He's from Pennsylvania. I don't know too much about Buchanan. He's someone I have to research a little bit more deeply because I'm becoming interested in him. I don't know that he even owned slaves, but obviously because he is a Democrat, he believes in the expansion of slavery. But he's from Pennsylvania. Now that's smart on their part to have him as a candidate because he is going to then pull maybe some northern states with him, even though he is for slavery. He may end up pulling some northern states with him. The Know-Nothings actually nominated someone, Millard Fillmore, who is not going to be of any consequence at this election. Now, that's going to split the vote three ways already, but if that's not good enough, there's more. So in 1856, this vote is going to be divided along geographic sectional lines. If you look at this map, the idea of having Buchanan as your nominee for the Democrats worked really well. Because if you look here, here's Pennsylvania. Here's where Buchanan's from. He's a Democrat. And again, he did take some of these northern states. He took Illinois with heavy populated Chicago, and also Indiana, which is good. It's good for them. And he took a lot of these states as well. Of course, they're southern and they're slaveholding, but they're also kind of borderish states. He also takes California, which is not a slaveholding state. And of course, all the southern states. Excuse me. Now, Fillmore, though, he takes enough votes off so that Fremont can't possibly win here. Enough of the northern votes. He takes these right here. So you see, dividing the vote up is not a good thing. It never is. But it's how Buchanan becomes president. All right, this is an important, very, very important court case. So the backstory is this. Dred Scott was a slave owned by a doctor in Missouri. The doctor takes him first to Illinois, which is a free state, and then to Wisconsin, which is part of the Northwest Territory. And in the Northwest Territory, slavery had been outlawed by the Northwest Ordinance back in the 1780s. So this is old law. And so Scott goes with his owner to these places, and then he goes back to Missouri with his owner, which is a slave state. The owner dies there, I think is how the story actually ends. And Scott becomes property then of the doctor's son. Well, in 1846, some anti-slavery lawyers hear of this story, and they help Dred Scott to sue for his freedom, saying that he lived in areas that were free, and so he should be free. Plus, his owner is dead now. Now, it takes 11 years for the Supreme Court, for this case to get all the way up to the Supreme Court, and all during this time, Scott is still a slave. And I think I should have put this name in red here, this Roger B. Taney. He is the Supreme Court Justice who delivers the opinion on this. And it's very important that you understand how severe this is. He says Scott is still a slave, period. End of story. Just because he went around to different places with his owner doesn't mean he's not a slave. He still is one. Further, slaves are not citizens, and so they have no right to bring a lawsuit. Okay, so that's pretty bad. Scott is still a slave. Slaves are citizens, so none of them can bring lawsuits. All right, it's pretty bad, but it gets worse. The court said that slaves are property, and so they cannot be taken away from their owners without due process because, after all, that is what it says in the Constitution. And last but not least, Taney wrote that Congress has no power to repeal slavery, which made the Missouri Compromise and every other compromise about slavery unconstitutional. It even means that voting to ban slavery is unconstitutional because that would be taking someone's property away. This one Supreme Court case is sort of like lighting the fuse for the Civil War, because now if you are the Republicans, if you are even marginally interested in slavery in the North, you realize that you have no recourse, that the Supreme Court has just put the hammer down, period, that slavery can go wherever anyone wants it. Even if you're in a state that has said slavery is not legal here, that itself is unconstitutional because you have, quote, taken someone's property away. So if you live, say, in Pennsylvania, and people decide to move in there and bring their slaves with them, that's perfectly fine now because you cannot tell people that they're not allowed to do that anymore. So this is a huge, huge important decision. I can't overstress. Like I've got this little picture of a nuclear bomb down here. That's how serious it was. I can't overstress the importance of this. All right, so Lincoln and Douglas are now coming onto the scene. It's the Illinois Senate race. Douglas is I believe he's the sitting senator from Illinois, and he's the same one who wrote the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which is now not even constitutional. And he is going to have to defend his seat against Abraham Lincoln. Now, I wrote on here that Abraham Lincoln is a nobody. He's not really a nobody. He had been in the House of Representatives for a while, but he's not exactly a political heavyweight yet. But Lincoln did the politically smart thing and challenged Douglas to debates. That's what the underdog should always do. And the person who is the front runner will usually not accept that challenge. And Douglas did not accept the challenge right away until Lincoln kind of forced his hands on it. And because what Lincoln would do is blow into town after Douglas had already given his speeches and then refute the speeches point by point and made Douglas look kind of foolish. So finally, Douglas had to give in and take Lincoln on in the same place at the same time. And they had this series of debates, which were very popular and even written up in newspapers back east and everywhere else. So that Lincoln became a household name everywhere. And even though Lincoln lost this election, he became looked at as a rising star. And Douglas was too. Douglas was looked at as maybe the next presidential candidate. All right, and I just covered most of what's on this slide. And of course, their debates are all over slavery. That's what they're talking about. And Lincoln says, you know, he's not there to stop the slavery where it exists, just to stop the spread. And Douglas is there, no, you're an abolitionist. You're just like, you know, crazy John Brown. You know, they went back and forth, but that's what this was about. All right, and then there's John Brown and Harper's Ferry. Even though the Democrat won in 1858, or in 1856, even though the Democrats won the presidential election with James Buchanan, Southerners are worried about Republicans at this point. They see that they are taking control of the House of Representatives, and they see this thing with the Lincoln-Douglas debates. They see how powerful Lincoln might become. And then there's this thing. John Brown, the same crazy John Brown who took his guys in there to Kansas and killed people over slavery, decided he would raid a weapons arsenal in Virginia to try to stir up a slave rebellion. He was unsuccessful, and he and his sons were caught and hanged, but he was viewed as a martyr by the North. And the Southerners are looking at these newspaper articles from the North praising John Brown and thinking, are all the Northerners crazy? Are they all like John Brown? Are they all just going to come here and shoot us and kill us? And it became a worrisome thing to them. My last bullet point, I think, here is a point of interest to me, at least, because while all this is going on and the country is falling apart piece by piece, Buchanan is president. And I don't know what he's doing. Like I said, I need to research him a little more. I don't know what he's doing to try to hold the country together. I have not read anywhere where he is trying to smooth things over or calm things down. But maybe we'll see in the next screencast if he's trying to help things out a little bit.